Gen X and Gen Z obviously have a lot of differences,
No cap.
but it's all about learning and understanding. Today, we're chatting with Cash again, and we're going to learn from him all about what Gen Z is doing with their finances. So, Cash, let's go ahead and jump right into this. Good to see you again. Question number one, how do you spend your money? Let's start there.
Right now, probably my biggest expenses are gas. I have to drive around for work a lot. Food is a big one. That's something I could definitely work on as well. I have some friends that do meal prepping, a lot of Costco. They try to cut corners every way they can. And I'm trying to learn how to do that myself, but I also appreciate food a lot and I like to treat myself every once in a while. But yeah, I'd say my two biggest expenses are definitely food and gas, which are two pretty essential things for me. I try to not be too frivolous. I spend some money on travel, but that's one of the things that I think is worth it. I have some friends spread out in different places and spending time with them is my favorite thing to do. So I will spend a little money on travel, but that is definitely something that I consider a positive expense.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's great. What about gadgets? Do you spend money on tech and gadgets and stuff like that?
My iPhone still has a home button. So no, I do have these headphones. I got them for free though. This is my biggest gadget, I would say. I have the cheapest Xbox possible. I use that every once in a while. I got a beat up MacBook Air. I am not a big gadget guy, but I do need certain things to work in my life. If my MacBook doesn't work, I will have to immediately buy a new one. My phone stops working, I will immediately buy a new one. So I learned from my parents, especially, to try to make things last as long as you possibly can. And you don't always need the newest and the best. So I try to live by that mantra.
Do you think that's a pretty common theme amongst other Gen Z people?
I think everyone finds their little places where they splurge. The one thing that I definitely splurge on is clothes. I'm really passionate about clothes. So I will spend a couple $100s on a jacket or something like that. Mm-hmm. And that's just something that I really care about, something I've always been passionate about. But I have a lot of friends who have $60,000, $80,000 cars and they're always getting the newest iPhone and something like that. I think it really just depends on maybe what values you were raised with and what you value in life. Personally, I value opening my bank account and seeing a bigger number every time that I do. I get a lot of enjoyment from that. I get more enjoyment from that than buying stuff most of the time. Buying stuff a lot of the time gives me anxiety, honestly. So I try to stay very neutral and only get the things that I need.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think food, clothes, and gadgets are probably the biggest things. I think gadgets is more of a Gen X thing because gadgets came around in the 80s. I was more of a gadget era. So I think we're a little more susceptible to the new gadget purchases than maybe you guys are. How do you save? You mentioned you like opening up your account and seeing a bigger number. How do you save? Like, where are you keeping your money and what are you saving it for? You mentioned travel, so obviously that's a big one. How and where do you save? And then how do you actually spend that on those things like travel? Does it just come right out of your checking account or do you use credit cards first? Or what's the order of operations for you?
Personally, I have never had any sort of credit in my entire life. I don't think that's necessarily the best thing in the world. I know that it's very important to build your credit history. And I know at some point down the line, I will have some credit. But that honestly, like I was saying earlier, it scares me to spend money, especially when I'm spending money that I don't necessarily have. I also will recognize that I definitely come from a place of privilege. I know that if I really had $0, I could text my mom or my dad or anyone in my family, and they, even if they didn't have the money, would be willing to help me out in some other way. So I definitely recognize that as a privilege of mine, and I do my best to take advantage of that. Just the idea of owing people money that I don't have is very scary for me, but I know I'm going to have to grow up and get over that at some point in my life. Most of my money right now is, unfortunately, because I'm not really making money off my money, just in my checkings or my savings. I do give away about 250 a month to an Edward Jones money manager type of person. I personally work maybe like 50 hours a week. So getting home and trying to invest can be a little exhausting sometimes. I try to keep up on the news and all that, but I like to trust the professionals and hope that they are doing the best that they can. It can be a little scary sometimes to have your money controlled by someone else. But as I was saying, I work all day, every day. So I like to come home and relax. You know, I have enough jobs as it is. And I feel like investing is almost another job in itself.
Sure.
It's definitely something I'd like to get into in my life. But with work, gym, keeping up everything, it seems a little daunting at the time. I do have a big goal that I'm saving for right now, though. I graduated college a little over a year ago. And since then, I've been living back home with my family. And I love my family. I'm very close with them. They're amazing people. But eventually, I'd like to go out on my own path. So my big goal right now is to move somewhere where I can find a good job opportunity and ideally be around younger population. Where I live in Sonoma County, I definitely have a lot of friends and there are young people around, but I go to some of the places where my friends live and sometimes I feel a little more at home, a little more like I belong. And also it's pretty expensive up here. It's expensive everywhere, but especially with the older population around here, I feel like older people normally have more money than younger people. I can get priced out of some things in a sense. So my big goal right now is to have a savings of roughly, I'd say around 20K in my savings. And I feel like I could live off that, pay rent and all that for about a year. As I was saying, it really stresses me out to spend money. It really stresses me out to have credit. So I'm just taking this a year and a half to build a safety net for myself.
I think that's really smart. You mentioned you're going to have to grow up and take on some credit at some point and owe some people money. I disagree, man. If you set up your financials in a way that we talk about here at Stacked Life, it's possible to just keep saving money and you can use your own capital as a source of leverage where you can use debt. So you technically do owe somebody something, but you can use it in a way that where you maintain control, where there are no payback terms and you don't have to really worry about a lot of those things. Now, there is something to be said about building credit worthiness, and that's a different subject where you almost do have to take on some sort of debt using credit cards or working with a bank, but you can do it in a way that doesn't have to stress you out. You know what I mean? So there's different ways to use debt. But at the end of the day, if you're well capitalized enough, you really don't even have to use a lot of the typical ways of accessing credit. So I love the fact that you're saving and the investing kind of feeling like a second or third or fourth job. I definitely know what you mean there. And again, like it's one of those things that a lot of people, the way that they invest, they take on a bunch of risk. And so they feel like they have to go out there and do a lot of research and really understand what they're getting into because everything they're doing is risk-based. It's possible to invest in a way that you don't have to take on a lot of risk. And so you don't have to make it like a second job. You do have to take some initiative and learn about where you can get access to those things. But again, that's exactly what we do. It's all possible there. And you don't have to feel like you need to learn about stock picks and things like that just to grow your money. So that's all great, man. So the main takeaway that I'm getting though, is that you're starting with the foundation. You're saving money, which a lot of the internet gurus out there will tell you not to do that because they want you to invest. But I think starting with the foundation is the right way to go. And then all the investing can take place once you've built up your capital base. So that's good.
I was just going to say, I was in college the last 4 years, just paying rent, buying food, trying to work as many hours as I could while trying to pass all my classes. I definitely ran into some times where I had $5 in the bank account for the rest of the week and had to figure out how to spread it. My main goal is to avoid that because those are some stressful times, a lot of beans and rice for dinner. And I'd like to be in a place where I'm a little more comfortable than that. So,
Yeah.
um, I've sort of not necessarily been to the bottom, but I've been struggling before, and I personally was not a big fan of that. So I would like to
Yeah.
avoid that at all costs.
That's a good, normal college experience. You gotta,
Yeah.
it's good to see what that's like, so that that's not the way you want to keep running things. So that's good. Speaking of, trying to learn about investing, where do you learn about financial strategies and hear about things that you may or may not want to do?
Just in terms of general finance, I try to sort of avoid the chit chatter on the internet and everything like that. It seems opinions can change in a heartbeat, in an instant. So I prefer to talk to people in the real world. I'm lucky because I think my parents have a very good mindset when it comes to money, but I think that also they both represent pretty different ends of the spectrum. My dad is a lot more willing to take on risk and normally has a little bit more capital on hand that he is not exactly willing to lose, but he could lose it and still survive. So because of that, I've seen him take some bigger swings, mostly in terms of real estate. Nothing crazy, but just we've bought some cheap properties and worked on them and done our best to flip them. And that was pretty inspiring, just being willing to take a big risk, and it often pays out. In the area that we live, Sonoma County, houses are pretty exponentially expensive. And I hear that we're in a housing bubble and one day it'll burst and all that. But since I've been alive, or since I've been aware, past 2008, it's been going up and up and up, especially if you know how to do good work that adds value to a house. So that's really what I've learned from my dad. It's okay to have a little money out sometimes if you're confident in your ability to do good work and you're confident that that good work may lead to returns in the future. When it comes to my mom, she taught me more of the things I was talking about earlier. Like, you don't always have to have the latest and the greatest stuff. You have to have the things that work for your lifestyle. And I really love that mantra. It's really easy to get caught up in buy, you need this. You'll look better if you have this. People will like you more if you have this. Your work will increase if you have this. I think all of those things may be true, but there's things you can do inside mentally, whether it be, for me, a big thing is going to the gym. Like, before I make any big decision or anything important, to get a sweat on, and I feel like it gives me a really clear mind. And that's a better feeling for me than getting the newest phone or something like that. And I feel like that's what increases my general well-being more than anything, which I would consider myself lucky in that extent. Like I was saying earlier, I do have a couple friends that are more in that buy mindset. And I feel like that can sometimes lead you to feeling a little unfulfilled, especially when there's a new thing every single week. Because as soon as you buy something, it's not your new great toy anymore. It's something you already own and have already used. And so I'm really grateful for my mom for that. She has really showed me amazing ways to make money stretch. And then also having an economics degree, having a general idea of how our money works and the stock market and things like that has honestly led me to, as we were talking about last week, not exactly not take on any risk at all, but I keep repeating myself, but the idea of risk is very frightening for me. And I've seen my parents succeed with it while taking on minimal risk. So I'd like to be in their shoes. You don't have to swing for a home run every time. People like singles and doubles, and I'm okay with hitting singles and doubles as long as it's making the team around me happy. That's how I try to live. I'm happy with the job where I'm at. I don't make $100K a year or anything, but I feel like I do good work and I make people happy with the work that I do. So finance for me is only one part of a very full and broad spectrum of how I live. So I try to keep a lot of financial things on the back burner and try not to constantly be thinking about it.
I really like everything you're saying. If I were to take a couple things that I heard you say, with the things you have done that your dad has done with the real estate, it sounds to me like he's living by the principle, which is the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules, which another way of saying that is if you have capital, opportunities have a way of finding you. And so if you have capital and you're in a place of liquidity, which just means you have access to that capital and control over it, you put yourself in a position to take advantage of opportunities when they come your way. And then another thing you said, which I like a lot, is the world of finance is not always about the numbers on an Excel spreadsheet. A lot of times what we really want, the whole purpose of having that money is to live the life the way we want to live it. And so you kind of mentioned putting the financial stuff on the back burner. And I don't know that I would categorize the way that I think about it as putting it on the back burner, but the way I would say it is similar in that it's possible to set up your finances so that you win with no luck, skill, or guesswork. The co-host of my podcast, Strategic Whole Life, John Montoya, he says that all the time on our podcast. There's no luck, skill, or guesswork required. It is possible to set up your finances so that you don't have to make it the forefront of your mind all the time, where you're making decisions based out of fear or lack or reacting to something that happened. So I like where your head's at, and I definitely appreciate that you brought those things up, because that's exactly how we run things over here.
Yeah, glad we could connect on that. Another big thing that inspires me in terms of finances is, again, my parents. I've seen my dad work his way up. Back when I was a kid, he was a one-man landscaping operation doing everything on his own. And he really built that trust with his clients. And he prefers to work for the same people he's been working for 40 years. He will rarely take on new clients. And he has built this business to a point where it's pretty self-sustainable now. And he is in more of a oversight role, a little less taxing and demanding on the body. But that really taught me, while you're young and you're able, you got to put in as much work as you can. And hopefully, like you were saying, set up a situation where you don't really have to take on risk, whether it be financial risk or just working so hard that you hurt yourself or something like that, especially when you're doing manual labor. So yeah, that's been really inspiring for me, just to see him transition into more of an oversight role, something that I don't think he ever imagined himself doing. In my mind, I think he imagined himself digging trenches for the rest of his life, but he's worked his way up and he's really made himself a jack of all trades. And that's what I want to be in the financial and working world if I can.
Those principles apply across the spectrum. I mean, really what he did is he built a level of mastery over his trade, and then he was able to transfer that mastery to his team. And now that his team is able to do it and he can guide that team, he's more in that leader position. So that's all we do. That's all we do with finances as well. We get control over it. We learn how it works, and then we pass it on to the next generation. So that's great. Well, hey, Cash, this has been really fun. I appreciate you giving me some insight on what you're thinking and how Gen Z kind of looks at money. I think it's super important, and I love working with young people and helping them map out what they want to do and learn how they can make it happen. So appreciate the time.
Yeah, of course. Happy to be here. Thank you for listening, and thank you for letting me bounce some ideas off you. And hopefully we can get together again and keep learning together. It's been a great experience.
Absolutely.